All right. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today for our avocado lacebug control and management webinar and workshop. Um, let's see. So we've got Jensen and Michael here today to be our presenters. And who would like to go first?
Okay.
Oh, really? I guess you just scroll down through it.
That's good. Oh, there we go. All right. Yeah, so thank you all for coming to this. I'm super excited to actually have this workshop. I'm Mike Bosch. I'm a postdoctoral researcher with the USDA on Hilo side at PBARC. The last years, I've been kind of focused on avocado lacebug and trying to understand their kind of what they're doing across the islands. And so I'm just going to share a little bit of kind of what we've been finding right thus far over these past couple of years and what we're going to be trying to do in the next couple of years as well. Also, if you haven't already picked up one of the survey sheets at the front, if you want to go ahead and fill that out, it's totally optional, but it'll just kind of give me and my collaborators a better idea of kind of how useful you're finding this research and kind of how to optimize how we're helping you all. All right, so like I said, I've been looking at and researching the avocado lacebug for the past couple of years now. That's mainly largely been composed of visiting different orchards, collecting lots of avocado leaves, and then counting lots and lots of bugs on them over long periods of time, and kind of seeing how those have been changing throughout the year and how it's been changing across different orchards on the Big Island. And so for what I'll be talking about in terms of results, I'll be talking about in terms of the abundances of avocado lacebug adults and kind of the nymphs or juveniles. So the lacebug adults, you can easily see them if you flip over your avocado leaves. They're these winged lacy insects. But if you see these darker insects that are a little smaller or reddish kind of crawling around them, those are just the juveniles, so they're at various different stages of development. And it's actually the juveniles here that tend to cause quite a bit of the damage that you'll see on your leaves. Kind of that notorious sunburn pattern. A lot of that is actually caused by the juveniles. So what I'm first gonna show, if I can, there we go. So the first bit of research that we were doing was looking at just large scale differences in varieties of different avocados that are grown across the Big Island. Again, so this was composed of going to 2 different orchards that grow just a lot of different varieties of avocado. So these plots right here, all of these different colored lines are just showing the abundances of avocado lacebug within these trees. And each of these lines are actually different varieties. And so, yeah, so the, right. And so the interesting thing here, I mean, first off, we can see it's really messy. And so there's at any given point in time from, let's say, December to this study went from December to June. There's a lot of variation in what we're going to see across different varieties, across different trees, and even across different orchards. Some orchards might be getting heavily infested by these lacebug, while a neighboring orchard might be barely getting touched by them. And one overall trend that we can also see is that the populations tend to, the abundances in these trees tend to decrease as we get out of these winter months and get into early spring and summer. And so that's kind of a consistent pattern that we've been able to see, not only in this study, but in a few other studies that I'll show as well. And so this is just kind of showing more of the results from those studies, looking at, yeah, can we see any consistent differences between different varieties? And so again, from these two different orchards, we looked at several different varieties of avocados, and over the span of a year, tried to determine if some varieties just tended to have more lacebug on them than others. And again, what we came across was there is a huge amount of variation in what's going on, but we do kind of see that varieties such as Kahaluu, Bayshore, and Sharwell, those tend to get higher numbers of lacebug on them, while as varieties such as Malama tend to experience lower infestation levels. And this is kind of what it honestly, it coincides a little bit with what I've been hearing from growers, various growers that I've been doing work with, is that Malama varieties tend to observe that they just aren't as heavily hit, while as those such as Kahaluu and Sharwell seem to show more damage on their leaves. And so I say that with knowing that there's still a lot of variation going on here. And so there is this tendency, but at your specific orchard, that pattern might be completely different. And so we were also looking at differences between different lineages of different hybrids, whether you have Guatemalan varieties, Mexican varieties, West Indian varieties, or Guatemalan West Indian hybrid varieties. And this was done at a different orchard site with various different varieties. And what this study showed was that in looking at the infestation severity, we actually found that Guatemalan by West Indian hybrids had a lower chance of experiencing more severe infestations. So infestations where you have lacebug damage covering 50% or more of the canopy. Now, if we look at what varieties are actually the Guatemalan by West Indian hybrids, these are hybrids that aren't super commonly grown in the state.
My name is Laura.
But as you can see, varieties like that are Kahaluu.
Yesterday,
Symbol 34. So Kahaluu, which I just said, has a tendency to have more lacebug abundance on it.
One of the.
So again, this is kind of another case where there's a huge,
I called yesterday, but
and you might be experiencing some differences between varieties that seem fairly noticeable at one orchard or one location, and then potentially have the completely opposite pattern at another location as well. And so on top of this study, this is kind of getting into what the trees are doing themselves. So we wanted to see kind of what determined whether or not an avocado lacebug was going to be in a tree. Is there any sort of chemistry within the leaves themselves that could affect the success of lacebug within a tree? And so we actually looked at the sugar content within these leaves to kind of see. So a lot of these sap-sucking insects rely on the sugar content in these leaves as a source of carbohydrates. We all need sugar for energy, converting that into energy. And so these bugs are a lot like us in that regard. And so we wanted to see, just at the base level, are there differences in the sugars within these leaves, and does that potentially determine, or at least influence in a way, kind of where you're bound to see these lacebugs? And we actually found that, yeah, there is a pattern here in that we tend to see a higher abundance of lacebug on leaves within canopies and across trees that tend to have a higher sugar content in them. Specifically, we actually found that it was the fructose content in these leaves that seem to indicate whether lacebug will be more abundant on those specific leaves. And so with that knowledge, we kind of conducted another study looking at, again, the population dynamics over the year of avocado lacebug across different orchards at different elevations. And so for this study, we looked at 6 different orchards altogether, 3 at these lower elevation sites between about 780 to 1150 feet, and higher elevations at 1540 and 2100 feet. And over the course of this time span from roughly November to June, we found that consistently these lower elevation orchards tended to have a higher abundance of lacebug on them. And so this seemed kind of consistent across all of our sites. And you'll notice that there's this same pattern as well that we saw in the previous study, which was that there tends to be this decrease in abundance of avocado lacebug in these canopies as we get through late winter into early spring and into summer. Where summer we tend to experience these infrequent surges in populations. And so here I separate these 2 abundance plots by the adults, so the winged individuals, and then those smaller black insects, the juveniles. And we see that the changes that we see are actually much more drastic with the juveniles. So yeah.
I was just curious because it ends at 1150 feet. And the higher elevation is 1540 feet, so what happens in between?
Right. No, that's a good question. Yeah. So we kind of based this off of orchards that we could find. And so that was kind
We're
of,
here
the
this
orchards
afternoon and not really doing anything
we-
because we can't go
but,
to.
I think it'd be safe to
We're
say
gonna go.
that kind
We're
of with-
going up north
with the
tomorrow.
pattern that we're seeing being so consistent, it's probably going to be the abundances are probably
I think Friday would be better.
I'm at 15.
yeah, and feel free to ask questions too, or if you'd
I
like
just
me
don't know what we're doing Friday.
to explain some of these plots a little bit
Oops.
more.
Sorry. No, wait.
And so again, kind of looking back at the sugar content in the leaves, because we were finding this response, we were curious of what the sugar content did in these trees throughout the year and whether that actually was influencing what we're seeing with the avocado lacebug. And what we saw was throughout the same time period we were doing these surveys, we found that the sugar content in these leaves did indeed change throughout the year. And it seems to correspond with flowering, fruit set, and leaf flush timing. So I should add to this too, the surveys that we did for this study were solely on Charwells. And so a lot of the flowering, fruit set, the timing of that were going to be fairly similar to each other. But you can kind of see in the lower left plot how we get this huge spike in our sugar content. And then a little after the start of February is when we get a crash. And if we look back at the right figure here, that actually corresponds really closely with the abundances that we see in the canopy of the lacebug. And so it does seem that there is a higher lacebug abundance found on these leaves with higher sugar content, both for the adults and the juveniles, but it really does seem that the abundances or the number of these juveniles that we find on these leaves seems to closely correspond with the changes in the sugar content that we see in these leaves as well. And so this does kind of suggest that what we're seeing might be that the juvenile lacebug, the abundances, the surges and crashes of these populations might be dependent on what the trees are actually doing throughout the year, as they're getting ready to push out a new flush, or flower or set their fruit for the year. And so, yeah. And so kind of that was a lot of that work was dealing with just the populations on the island and trying to understand how they were interacting with the different orchards on the island. And yeah, very much just more on the basic, trying to understand what they're doing. Recently, we've been trying to look at the actual efficacy of different insecticides. And so what one study that we did was actually looking at the systemic effects of neem oil extract as a directant. So systemic pesticides are basically you use them as a soil drench, and the active compounds are uptaken into the tree, and they're kind of relocated or reallocated to the various tissues and leaves in the tree. And the idea is that, okay, the tree now has these active compounds, these active insecticides in them. If you have these leaf sucking insects such as the lacebug, when they go to feed on that leaf, they'll be sucking and ingesting the active compound. So hopefully that should kill them. And so what we were looking at was this compound azadirachtin, which is an organic compound that you find in neem oil. We wanted to see if we could actually use that as a systemic biopesticide, and whether we could actually, whether it could effectively kill the avocado lacebug. And if so, how long is the azadirachtin, or that active compound, how long can we actually find it in the plant tissue? And so we did this study where we took these little about 2 foot high Charwell seedlings, and we drenched them with azadirachtin, and then we stuck some of those little juveniles on them, and we looked to see how many of them died. And we varied the concentration of the azadirachtin that we were using within the product label. And so what we found was actually, yeah, there is an increase in the number of lacebug that die when they ingest the plant tissue treated with azadirachtin. And what we found was that this increase in death actually lasted for quite a few weeks, and was actually larger than our untreated trees for roughly at least 4-ish weeks. And so, and this was regardless of the concentration that you use. So if we use the lower concentration, that 45 ppm, which was based on the product label of the product that we used, that tends to the effects of that tend to peter off a little quicker than if we used our higher concentrations, such as the 180 ppm. And so, yeah, so the outcome from this work has been kind of really promising in terms of potentially offering a way, a potentially organic way of actually treating and potentially controlling the lacebug. And so just kind of in summary, we found that our lacebug populations appear to increase during our winter months. I'm sure you all may have experienced that recently. I think right now they're probably crashing a little bit, so the populations that you might be seeing are going down. And this kind of corresponds with the tree flowering, the fruit set, and the pushing of new flush within these trees. And so overall, it does seem to suggest that these populations follow the tree phenology. So again, just kind of what your trees are doing throughout the year, and when they're flowering or pushing out new leaves. And what this also showed was that lower elevation orchards tend to experience more severe infestations. The reason for this may just be that with the temperatures being a little warmer at these lower elevations, they might be developing a little quicker. And so if they're able to develop quicker, their populations can increase a lot faster than at these cooler elevations. And so that might be why lower elevations might experience more damage in their canopies. And what we also found was that there are certain cultivars and lineages that may experience more severe infestations, but it's going to be super variable. So unfortunately, we couldn't get a concrete answer on varietal differences within the avocado trees. Now, a few reasons I think that might be is it might be a rootstock issue in that I know we kind of in Hawaii we use a variety of different rootstocks just depending upon what's available. And so it could be that the rootstock that we use that we graft onto that might be affecting the vulnerability of these trees in a certain way. Another thing that I think may be happening and that me and my supervisor have talked about are actually wild avocado trees that are just kind of growing wherever it might be acting as reservoirs for these lacebug populations. And so I've talked to a lot of different growers that have said that, you know, they'll spend a week spraying their entire orchard and it'll be cleared for a few days and then they go back and the lacebug adults are just back on it. And what I think might be happening is the spraying is killing what's on those trees, but if you have nearby wild avocado trees growing, it could be that they're just coming in from those trees and then just establishing on yours again. And then again, with the azadirachtin, it's the soil drenches of the azadirachtin, it showed a positive result in that it did increase how many juvenile lacebug it was able to kill. So it does offer a promising organic method for controlling lacebug. Along with it being organic, a lot of the products that use azadirachtin have actually don't have a pre-harvest interval as well. So a lot of other systemic pesticides do because they're toxic to beneficial pollinators. But in this case, we don't have that. And so again, kind of an added benefit for that. The downside to that is that we were using just these small trees. So kind of the next step for that is to try to actually see if we can see the same effect in mature trees. So that was what we did over the past few years. What we're currently doing is we're actually starting a project trying to develop a more economically minded strategy towards managing lacebug. And so kind of going off of what I had said earlier about having to continuously spray these trees to treat for lacebug, a lot of growers that I have talked to have said that, you know, they've given up trying to manage these lacebug because they will go and they'll invest the money and the time to try to spray these trees and try to, you know, get 100% coverage in their canopies just for a week later, the bug is back on their tree. And so what we're trying to do is develop a way to basically minimize how often you have to spray these trees, but still maximize how much control you're getting. And so that hopefully, ideally, by that, it would minimize both the financial and logistical strain of having to try to manage these infestations. And the question from this that really emerged was, how can we basically map cumulative damage? So all the damage of the leaves that you see on your canopy, how can we say that, okay, if your canopy experiences this much damage, you're going to experience this much loss in your fruit yield? And so that's where the idea of this next project came from. And it's really going back to monitoring these trees for damage. And so this is just a little image showing just varying degrees of lacebug damage that we've seen in these trees. So we might see, you know, somewhat minor damage, or we just have these little splotches all the way to, okay, almost the entire leaf is being fed upon, it's turning yellow. This brown necrotic area has almost taken completely over. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, at what point do enough of your trees have to experience a certain amount of this damage for it to finally affect your fruit yield? And so what we kind of see throughout the season, so from flowering and fruit set to the next flowering and fruit set episode of your trees, is that you get this flowering is completed and you get this fresh flush. And throughout that season, you get an accumulation of damaged leaves in your canopy. So the lace bug, they just feed on your leaves. Some of them will fall off, new flush gets pushed out, but they just keep coming back and keep feeding on more and more of your leaves until finally you get to the late season, which kind of just happened. And if you're experiencing a heavy infestation, you're going to experience a lot of your leaves on your tree just yellow and brown and eventually dropping off. And so we want to figure out, okay, at what point in that infestation throughout the season should you start treating for lace bug, such that your tree might look damaged, but it's not going to actually affect how much fruit you're able to get off of that tree. And so that's where the idea of this economic threshold for management comes from. And that depending upon the product you want to use and how effective it is at actually managing the lace bug, we can actually calculate based on what we know about the connection between damage and yield, when you should start spraying with that particular product to both minimize, so you're not spraying just the entire season, so to minimize the applications, but then to hopefully not significantly affect how much yield you're using. And so this is, again, this is a project that we're trying to start as a way to optimize how you can manage the lace bug. And the nice thing about this is that for whatever particular product you want to use, whether it's a foliar spray, a soil drench, or perhaps in the future, some sort of biocontrol agent, as long as we know, as long as there's information on how effective it is at managing lace bug, we should be able to actually determine when you should implement those management strategies. And so that's one of the projects, the major project that we'll be doing right now for the next couple of years is trying to really map onto how damage in your canopy equates to yield. Yeah.
Mike, you mentioned biocontrol. I mean, working with pheromones at all, or?
No, so as of what I know, I don't know of anyone that's been working on pheromones. I've been doing some preliminary work trying to look at different traps, different ways to potentially trap them or manage them. But yeah, thus far I haven't.
How about the building resistance in immature trees by swapping out sucrose for glucose or fructose?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I don't quite know in terms of trying to manipulate the sugars in the tree. Yeah, yeah, I guess yeah, I don't know.
Tracy's out there, make her do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But yeah, if there is a way, and that's saying that we did see that correspondence, but the study wasn't able to conclude whether there was a direct relationship. And if we can somehow, if there's a way that we could potentially manipulate the sugar content in the leaves, we could actually determine if that's a factor
Yeah.
that's directly
I think that
affecting.
it's a factor in terms of varietal, like for us, Nishikawa is far more resistant than anything.
Yeah.
And then you have this daily 11, and then you have the whole group, Malama group, you know,
Mhm.
it's called, and finally down to the Charlotte Kalu.
Right.
The sugar content, if you measure, make a slurry and measure the bricks on Nishikawa and Yamagata versus Charlo is a big difference, so.
That's a good point, and that could explain differences that we see from orchard to orchard, depending on, yeah, just how different your sugars are between your different varieties.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
So
remember you talked about sugar content from different orchard, right? And we'd like to see if there's environmental factors that, like, even if it's within the same variety of avocado, if it doesn't have it at different elevation, it changed the sugar content of the leaves, is
Mhm.
that still a thing, or is it something that we see?
Yeah, so if we go up. Yeah, so if we looked at, so looking at the different sugar content in this study, we actually found that consistently higher elevation sites had a higher sugar content.
Same time?
We don't know. So for this one, we looked at just total sugars. Whereas in the previous study, we actually were able to split apart the types of sugars. Yeah.
I'd like to do it because when we grasped a lot and you have your first flush, your first two leaves. And they will wet right on the shower well and over here at daily 11 and then. But it's a problem to produce trees when there's no energy for the second push after those first two leaves are dead, so.
Right. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that would be an interesting thing to look at, the actual, how are the leaf compositions different between these two newly grafted trees? Yeah.
So there's a question from the chat. Does the systemic chemicals get into the avocados more than with a spray? It's like off the spray.
That's a good question. I don't know. From what I've read, systemic pesticides, as long as you avoid certain periods within the tree's development of fruit, I don't think it should. There's been a lot of conflicting findings with that though, particularly with things such as imidacloprid, and a lot of different talk of whether it is being, whether you do find it in the fruit, whether you don't. From what I understand and from what I have found with the azadirachtin, I don't think so, but this is also one of the first studies that have tried to actually look at using an azadirachtin soil drench.
Definitely follow the label.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Definitely follow the label.
Drenching would be better than spraying. What is the quantity?
Yeah, so what I know about neem is that it is the active compound azadirachtin is pretty sensitive to UV radiation. And so if you spray it on the leaves, it can, especially here with how intense the UV index is, it can break down pretty readily. Whereas using a soil drench, it actually does protect it a little bit from UV radiation. And so it prolongs its effectiveness in the tissue. But again, I say that with the caveat that this is kind of an emerging study that we're just starting. And so we still have kind of a ways to go to figure out kind of if the same response we get in these younger trees, we see in these mature trees as well.
I have a question. Oh,
Lake bugs interact with ants the same way they interact with aphids. If the ants protect the lake bugs.
So from what so the aphids produce honeydew, so that sugary substance that the ants love so much. I don't think they would form that sort of relationship with lacebug, because I think they are just producing that black tarry stuff. I don't think the ants really really like that yet. You might see ants though on the same leaf if there are things such as like scale insects. So they look like little shells almost, because those produce the honeydew. So you might actually see them there. Yeah. What's that? Oh, okay.
Una, did you want to unmute yourself again?
yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry about that, you guys. I guess when my call came in, it unmuted me. I apologize. I kind of wasn't it was kind of hard to hear the individuals that are in the room with you, but so if we were to use neem oil, can you give us the quantity?
Can you repeat her
Um,
question also?
Yeah,
Yes.
so the question was the quantity needed for neem oil. These
Especially a
soil
drench.
drenches.
I'm
So
interested in drenching.
oh, sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry, I'm interested in drenching, so as not to, hurt some of the beneficials, et cetera. Also, because some of the trees are really big.
Right. So yeah, in terms of drenching, I've talked to a few growers and they have used imidacloprid, which with very positive results. So imidacloprid, so things like Wrangler, Admire Pro.
Oh, no, I'm talking about for neem. I'm an organic farmer, so I wouldn't be using imidacloprid.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, yep. So neem, there are a few products such as Azadirect that have a label specifically for soil drenching. However, those right now they haven't the label doesn't contain any information on using them in actual orchards as a soil drench. It's mainly been limited to nurseries. And so this is so they will have information on the concentrations to use, but we still don't know if those concentrations are going to be enough to be uptaken into mature trees.
So the neem oil product that has been sold here for a good 30 years, what was the guy's name? The one that comes in the bottle that's bottled locally. Do you know anything about the quantity on that one?
No, I do not. So that was about a locally bottled source of
I can't think of the
neem.
name at this moment.
Okay. Yeah, the only other product that I know of is Azera. I mean, there are quite a few different Azadirect
Right.
products, but the ones
Sure.
that I've seen most commonly are Azadirect and Azera. So Azera, that label doesn't actually have systemic soil drenching because it contains pyrethrins.
Mhm.
But there are a number of different products with just azadirachtin in it that should have a label for soil drenching.
Okay.
We'll move on to Jensen.
That works. Like the audio. Yeah, just check this out. All right, hi, my name's Jensen Ueda. I'm an extension agent on the island of Oahu. I've been working with Lacebug maybe about 6 years now. The reason why I got involved with this is because my growers are asking for chemical products to treat the trees because nothing was working and they were losing a lot of fruit to the lacebug. I worked with azadirachtin too, and I think most of the labels are labeled for nematode suppression as the soil drench application goes. But
as far as I know, you could treat for nematodes and the byproduct would be uptaken to control lacebug. I don't think any label is labeled for control of lacebug as a soil drench. And then I think the neem product, like Trilogy, would be different from an azadirachtin product because it has a higher concentration of that active ingredient azadirachtin versus neem oil as itself is little less processed, I guess would be the right definition.
The azadirachtin is like specifically extracted
From the neem cake, yeah. Let's see. So if a little bit of background on the ALB, maybe I should have gone first. So it was kind of first reported on Oahu in 2019, and now it's pretty much across the state on all the major islands. You'll see it affecting the trees. They affect trees of various ages. Pretty much all varieties will have issues with it. It's the level of damage you'll see is going to be different across different varieties, across different geographic locations, elevations. Those are going to change based on the climate versus the variety. Like Mike said, you'll see that chlorotic leaf spot, and it typically will progress on the more severe trees into necrotic spots, and it'll eventually fall off. And then you'll lose that photosynthetic process, I guess, from those leaves to generate energy for the fruit or the leaf or the flower. Typically, the insect will have a life cycle of about 3 weeks. And so basically every month you're having a new generation coming about. And they will be accelerated or decelerated based on the temperature. Typically, they'll move a little faster when they're in a warmer climate and then slow down a little bit in a colder climate. And so we're going to be dealing with this all year long, multiple generations a year. And they'll slow down, like Mike said, certain times of the year. One of the challenges with them is their eggs are covered in that tar-like substance that he mentioned. And so they're pretty well protected. So it's really hard to control the eggs. And like I mentioned, let me move this out of the way. Sorry. So one of the main objectives was to evaluate a series of insecticides for efficacy against the lacebug. We wanted to see how well organic products did, and as well as some of the conventional products. So we had multiple tools, whether you're an organic farmer or a conventional farmer. And so when we started this project, this was kind of the list of products that I found to be labeled on avocado that had some potential at controlling an insect like lacebug. And so there was 11 products that we selected. Most of it was because that's what we had in our insecticide storage as well. That's why we selected that particular brand of that product. There's not every product, but most products have different brand names for that same active ingredient. So this is just what we selected because it's what we had in our storage. So we didn't have to go and buy all the different product lines for that same active ingredient. And so we're not promoting any one product. We just want to associate the active ingredient of what we sprayed. And so everything that has a single asterisk is an OMRI approved product. So you could use it in organic production. And then anything with a brand name that has 2 asterisks is now a restricted use product. So you need your RUP license to apply these products. When I did this trial, Sivanto was the only one that was not restricted use, but as of this year, I believe it's now a restricted use product. So you would need your license to apply that particular product. But basically all these products have a different active ingredient. So we wanted to see how that active ingredient or how the insect responded to that active ingredient with the label rate. And so the rate that we selected on the label was in that right column. For this particular trial, we selected to use a backpack mist blower. I have an image if you don't know what a backpack mist blower is. We use a Stihl SR450 backpack. There's a bunch of other brands like Maruyama. Solo also makes one. And then I have a video on one that I built myself that you could probably build yourself for a lot cheaper than buying one. And then we did 2-week spray intervals using about 220 gallons per acre of water. And then because I wanted to use a surfactant with all the products, I selected an OMRI approved surfactant, which is kinetic. And so it's a penetrating surfactant. So it helps to get systemic products into the tissue a lot easier than some of the other surfactants. So that's the reason why we selected kinetic. because it was an organic product, so we could use it across the board for all the different chemicals. And so this is a steel backpack mist blower. It holds about 4 gallons. And so if you're spraying, we were spraying about half a gallon per tree up to 3/4 of a gallon. So it's about 10 to 15 trees of what for one tank. And so if you have more than 10 trees, you're going to be filling up your tank pretty often. And I think Andrea has some good calibration worksheets that you could use to help figure out how many tankfuls you need per field. And then depending on the power of the sprayer you have, you can get up to about 20, 25 feet in height of the tree, of the canopy. And so if you have trees taller than that, it may be hard for you to get contact products up to that high. And so you'll still have an infestation past your reach of the spray. I think Mike talked a little bit about action thresholds. And so the first thing we did was kind of generalize the tree health and use that as our action threshold. So a healthy tree would be rated at 1. 2 is when you're starting to see a little bit of damage and that initial infection. Rating 3 is when they're starting to establish now on the tree and they're starting to multiply and spread out throughout that canopy. 4 is almost every leaf has been covered by at least one lace bug on the leaf. And then 5 is when everything is colonized and they're starting to drop the leaves now, and that's pretty much far gone, and you're going to be losing productivity at that point. So in most cases, we're saying about scale 2 or 3 is when you're going to be doing your action threshold without having that economic data that Mike is going to be generating. That's kind of when we've been suggesting you start doing the application so that you can stop the spread from getting too severe and preventing that leaf drop, because that's what's going to be determining your overall yield and quality of the fruit in the end. And so what we did was basically after each application, we came in and counted how many were dead and how many were still alive on those leaves that we selected. And so the products was Admire Pro, which is imidacloprid. So these are all foliar sprays. It was really well. Ecotech is a plant oil or oil. That one seemed to be pretty good, at least in this particular trial. Mustang is a RUP product. The synthetic pyrethroid worked really well. And then Sivanto Prime was the other one that worked really well, which is now a RUP product. So Admire Pro and Sivanto Prime are systemic insecticides. And then Ecotech and Mustang were more contact insecticides. And the Mustang has a little bit of residual action on the leaf after spray. But for the most part, we still had some kill by all the other products. So we're getting like 70% kill by most of the other organic products and other products in the trial. And so you're not doing nothing by spraying, you're getting some of that population down, so it's not spreading or establishing further within that tree canopy. And because each product has a number of applications per year or per crop, our next objective was to figure out what would be a recommended spray program throughout the year. If you were going to spray at least once a month every year. This is an example of what we chose to represent what a spray rotational program might look like, whether you're a conventional farmer or an organic farmer. This was a lot based on the kill percentage that we got from the original trial. That's why we selected these products. And we tried to put in rotation a good product with a weaker product and a good product again.
That is so much work.
It is so much work. And so this was 3 years ago when we came up with this program, and it's an example. And I think depending on your,
it's funny, I just said that is so much work, and then you've got it. No one's gonna spray every month.
yeah, and so it is a lot of work, and I wouldn't recommend monthly applications unless you really want to or have the time to do that. But I wanted to present some of the data that we got from that rotational program. And so this is what and when we spray them for both the chemical and the organic products, or the conventional and the organic products. We use the same surfactant, the same spray equipment, and we were doing 2 to 4 week rotations with the product. This is kind of the damage rating throughout the trial that we were seeing on the trees. And then so for the conventional products, you could see that after the Admire applications, the percent dead went up. So these ones in red would be the Admire Pro. And then in this particular trial, a chemical company recommended we try Pure Crop 1, which has some kind of nanotech product, but you can see after application, the percent dead went down. So we're no longer recommending based on our data. And then products like Danatol, which is another synthetic pyrethroid, showed to have good kill. And then Sivanto Prime maintained the level of kill. And then Ecotech also maintained that level of kill during that period. For the organic products, it was pretty much steady throughout. You're getting about 40% kill no matter what product we were using. Even the Ecotech in this particular trial seemed to be not as effective as during the conventional one. And it's probably because you had Admire Pro still probably in the tissue, keeping the population at bay. That's why the Ecotech did really well in the conventional rotation versus the organic rotation. It could be just you had so much population during that time that you didn't get the same level of kill or percent kill. Another application method of Admire Pro or imidacloprid is a soil drench. And we didn't include that in the previous trial. So I was curious to see what that might look like on the tree as far as control. And so we have a really terrible tree at our research station. The variety is called Yamagata. It never has any leaves. About a month after the new flush comes out, everything gets damaged and falls off. So prior to this, we've never had flower because there was not enough energy to even push flower out in this particular tree. And so I selected it as a good candidate to try this out to see if we could get enough leaf canopy maintained to get some flower. And so in October, this is what the tree looked like of 21. We did the application in October. 1 month later, the new flush started to come out. 3 months later, the flush is still there. 5 months later, the flush is still there. Typically, the tree would be back to that October stage by 5 months. And so you wouldn't have the typical flower flush. The cool thing is we did have fruit in April. The sad thing is by August, without any additional treatment, the leaves are starting to fall off again. And so now all the fruit that was generated has sunburn. And so my recommendation has been, if you're going to use that soil drench application, maybe it's better after fruit set, you put it in so that you can maintain the leaf canopy to get that fruit to harvest. And then do another application of something else because you have only one soil application per year for imidacloprid. And so you would need another insecticide to get your canopy up for the flower flush so that you have enough energy. And so instead of spraying every month throughout the year, maybe target your sprays to keep as much leaf on the tree as possible at a certain point after the flush, just so you have enough energy to get it to flower, plus enough energy to keep the leaves on and support the fruit load without having it sunburn. That would be my suggestion to minimize the number of applications as well as the cost to apply. These insecticides are very expensive. I think that azadirachtin is probably like $300 per quart or something like that now. And so it will get expensive. If you're applying 8 ounces per acre or whatever it is, that's like half the bottle per acre. So it's a couple $100 per acre.
So to clarify, soil drench for about 6 months, 5 to 6 months is effective, even though, but because you're allowed by law to only do it once a year, you're suggesting adding on, piggybacking to have the misting of the other options.
Yes.
Before the 6 month effective period of soil drench or after the 6 month effective soil drench period?
I would say the flush that comes prior to your flowering would be when you would spray something else. One of the challenges with imidacloprid is you can't soil treat it if there's flower on the tree and there's a period of, because it's going to get translocated into the flower and you have potential for bee or pollinator kill, it's on the label that you can't. So after the flowering would be the furthest away from the next flower of applying it. So that would be my recommendation if you're going to soil drench it. And then the flush that comes out after that for the energy for the flower is when you would spray on the foliar applications just to keep the leaves around long enough to generate enough energy to support the flowering period.
So that would mean, 4 to 5, spraying applications per year, per period, year period. Along with maybe 5-6 months of the soil drench, assuming you targeted that at the right time, but still overall.
Yeah.
Might be 5 or 6 spraying instead of 12 spraying.
Yes.
5 or 6 piggybacking with the soil drench.
And it goes along with the thresholds too. So after your first application, you do monitoring. And so if you've either eliminated that population or reduced that population, then you may not have to spray the next month. You can get through the next month. And then the population builds up again, then you spray the third month. So then you're cutting your sprays in half, and where you're maybe 2 to 3 foliar applications on a soil drench.
Or 6 weeks or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
like that.
So a lot of it's based on monitoring. And so I can't really generalize the spray rotation. But my suggestion would be to make applications to maintain the leaf canopy before flowering and then during fruit set and fruit harvest. And after this particular trial, Nicino informed me that they had a product called Bexar, which is a tofenpyride product. It's a product that we use on cabbages for diamondback moth, and it's used on melons, I believe, for thrip control. It's a really effective product. It's not organic. It works really well though. And so I wanted to so Admire Pro or imidacloprid has been the standard, I think, for most growers that are conventional that I work with, because it works really well, both foliarly and as a soil drench. And so I use that as my grower practice or my control product. And then I wanted to compare how Bexar did versus that particular product. And I also want to mention that Admire Pro or imidacloprid has either one soil application, or you can do multiple foliar applications. I believe it's 4 at the highest rate, 4 applications a year. So if you wanted to forego the soil treatment, you could go and spray imidacloprid 4 times a year, or whatever the label specifies, instead of soil drenching. But then that means you have to spray it up into a canopy, which is a lot harder to do than putting it through the irrigation. And so for that soil treatment, what I did was I basically mixed a dilute product per square foot of that tree, and then I just drenched it around the canopy line. I just ran the hose for about an hour. That's how I treated that tree. And so one way you could do it is on a rainy day, start pouring around the tree canopy. That would be a soil drench application if you don't have irrigation. Basically, you want to move that product into the root zone where it'll bind to the soil, lock up, and then it'll be there for the roots to keep continuously taking it up. So that's why you have that extended control with that product, because it's continuously sucking it up into the tree canopy for a longer period. And so for this product, I wanted to see how it compared to imidacloprid. And so what I did was I did foliar application, just 1 application to 4 trees per product. And then I marked leaves on that particular tree. And so I took 5 leaves per tree that I sprayed for each treatment, so that I could monitor the specific leaf over time on how the population on that particular leaf changed because of the application. And so at 0, 3, 7, 14, 21, and 28 days after application is when I did the counts. And so I was out there with a clicker counting how many nymphs and adults were still walking around after the application. It takes about 2 hours for just the 20 trees that I counted. And that's what I'm paid to do. So that's what I was doing. And so I selected leaves that had higher populations for Bexar and Admire Pro, because I wanted to see how much I could get off that leaf with the treatment. And then the control leaves that were untreated, I selected the ones with the least amount of population, because I wanted the leaves to still be there by the end of counting. And so you can see at 0 day, there's about 45 for the Admire Pro leaves, about 30 on average across the 5 leaves, and 4 trees per treatment. So 20 leaves. 3 days after application, the population basically drops off for both Admire and Bexar. And then at 1 week after application, there's very few left. And then out to 21 days, there's basically nothing. And then 28 days, there's still nothing walking around the trees. And this is like, there's still eggs on the leaf too. And so I know Admire is probably still within the leaf tissue, but the Bexar is not a systemic product. And so there seems to be some kind of residual control with that particular product. And so I didn't count past 28 days, so I don't know how far out the control would be, because it would be now into reestablishment by neighboring trees or neighboring leaves, because I only sprayed in a 30 tree orchard. I only sprayed, what was that, 20 trees, or yeah, 20 trees. And so there is trees in there for reestablishment that weren't sprayed. And so I don't have any data past 28 days, but at least for that month, you'll get really good control as a foliar application with both Admire Pro or Bexar. And so it's a new tool that you can add to that spray rotation if you're going to go with a conventional chemical route. Yeah.
Where the big high numbers initially, did they fall off, or they more for them?
They're still there. They were still there by the 28th day. And so, yeah, I tied colored flags to each leaf. And then I went back to each leaf and did counts to see how much was still left on there. And so to summarize the products that you could use if you had, for an organic production, these would be my recommendations on products you would use either in rotation or standalones. I wouldn't mix them. I would just use them so you have multiple tools throughout the year, so you're not building resistance to any one product. Conventional products, and then if you do have your license, you could add these three into the mix too if you wanted to.
It could you be that applying neem doesn't build resistance?
Yeah, as far as I know, it shouldn't build resistance. And so it's just an expensive product. And so if you could use a cheaper product like MP, is probably a cheaper product. I would go with that as a contact insecticide. But if you did want to go at the soil treatment type of action, if it does prove to be very effective on mature trees, then the product like azadirachtin would be your best bet to get it through the. So you could use that in replace of Admire Pro, maybe in an organic rotation program as a comparative product. I do have some anecdotal information from some of my growers that they've been spraying with Surround, which is a kaolin clay. And so they've been spraying it on there. It seems to be protecting the leaves as well. But then you also do get some residue on the fruit if you're spraying it during that fruit set. And so you may have to start washing fruit if the market doesn't accept it.
Because around this like
Kaolin clay.
Something.
Yeah.
And it's like this white powder.
The white powder, yeah. It don't look pretty, and so you'd have to potentially wash it off if it's later on that harvest period and hasn't naturally come off with either rainfall or. So this is kind of my creation. I was getting tired of filling 4 gallons every 10 trees, and so and one of those backpack sprayers is probably $800 or $900 now. And so if you wanted to get away from that and you had a larger field, you have a quad or ATV that you could ride. Basically what I did was I took a leaf blower from anywhere. I bought this tip right here from Solo for this particular one. You could buy the replacement part from Maruyama or Steel. I duct tape it to the front of the leaf blower. And then I connect the nozzle on the distribution mechanism of the actual mist blower to the spray tanks. And so this is a 30-gallon electrically powered spray tank that's connected to the battery on the ATV. And so that just pumps water to the nozzle. And then the leaf blower itself is actually what's dispersing that micronized liquid up into the canopy. And so you can use air force to get liquid up into the tree versus trying to use a sprayer and spraying more liquid up into the tree to get the coverage. And so it's a really cool way to product that. And I'm just using air compressor hose to sprayer. So you can connect any amount of length of air compressor hose to get the length of your if you have a 2-person operation, somebody can drive the ATV not having to move. Another option is you can sit on the ATV spray. If you're coordinating enough, you can spray both and then just drive through. I do have a grower that mounted 2 of these blowers onto the tractor and just did have the canopy height and just drove to the picture. But buying an actual mist blower, which may be hard to bring in and also expensive, that's That's all it is attach it to their actual spray tank. That's just helping you get liquid up into the canopy more than you would be able to with a regular spray gun or a backpack sprayer.
If you had a tractor, wouldn't it make sense to put a pole on the side of the tractor, vertical pole, to get yourself up 10, the spray head about 10 feet, so you could either whether turn it or you're turning it or something like that, get a lift on this thing rather than be shooting on it from the bottom?
Well, so all the pests are on the bottom, so you have to shoot upwards.
Okay.
Lacebug is always going to be on the bottom side of the leaves, and so you're going to have to shoot the force upwards. And so,
there's no way to get that very canopy unless you have them spread far enough apart and you can hit a 45-degree angle.
so the modification to this is if you have a strong enough blower, you can attach more PVC and make multiple nozzles. And then each one is at a 45-degree angle, so you can cover multiple heights and you could just drive through the orchard. But
That's complicated.
yes, and so this is as far as I go with my MacGyvering skills. And so the concept is pretty easy to manipulate. And this leaf blower was like $150, I think. And the spray tank was another $150. And so at most you're spending less than $500 to do this compared to buying an actual mist blower, which is going to cost you at least $900.
For this
Mhm.
thing, how do you normally do it?
We're using Andrea's very special calibration tool now on her publication. There's one way you can do it is collect the amount of water that's coming out. For this particular spray, it's a fixed volume because it's a pump spraying out water. For the normal backpack mist blower, there's a lot more factors that go into it. So like if you spray the trigger, there's more pressure on the tank, so the liquid comes out faster. And so the calibration is a little bit more challenging. But a lot of it is just collecting the amount of liquid per given amount of time, or how much time it takes to spray one tree, for example. And then you multiply how many trees you have to spray, and that tells you the volume. But yeah, there's a orchard calibration tool now on our publications website if you have more questions on calibration. And then some more general control techniques that are being recommended. So just keeping the tree health up so that there's enough energy for it to sustain itself is one recommendation. Making sure you have enough fertilizer, irrigation, if you are applying irrigation, and then keeping up with pruning. My recommendation is to figure out what trees are less susceptible or less susceptible in your production area. For example, Yamagata is really bad in our area in Wailua, Oahu. And so I don't recommend any of my growers because you're going to be spraying 12 times a year just to keep that from dying. And so there's a variety, San Miguel, which does really well. And we never spray that tree and it's always loaded. We get maybe a 1 or 2 on the rating scale as far as damage. It does have lace bug on the tree, but it doesn't ever defoliate. And so we get good fruit yield with no sunburn. And so by selecting the right varieties that don't require spray applications is the better route to go. But if you have an established orchard, you either have to take it all down or and restart it, or figure out a spray program to maintain it. That would be my more sustainable recommendation, is to figure out the more tolerant varieties in your location.
If some varieties are more resistant, have you analyzed whether the 3 types of sugar are in the same ratios as the other, or could it be in other mineral content that's picked up from the soil? And if so, for that variety, could there be a mineralistic approach to treatment to simulate the type of diversification without having to use this type of chemical?
Yeah, so the sugar part is outside of my expertise, and I'll leave that to Michael and his lab to figure out the sugar ratios. But yeah, I think that seems to be a good component of why they particularly like a certain variety or not. For us on Oahu, we're starting to use essential oils now as a spray program for CRB. It's a big problem on Oahu, and even the stronger chemicals are starting to be less effective. And so we're trying to find more alternative ways to manage them. And so we're using stuff like basil oil, I think thyme oil as sprays, which are not typically used for agriculture. They're more like other uses, but they seem to deter the pests from actually going into the coconut trees. And so that would be another option that I haven't looked into, is using essential oils like that as a deterrent, a pheromone, not a pheromone deterrent, but another deterrent for them to not establish on that particular tree. That'd be one particular avenue that which could be looked at. I haven't looked at it though. There's I think there's mention of biocontrols. So this is what the internet says are biocontrols for ALB. I think a lot of the biocontrol work has been done in Florida and California. We did start a project at our orchard on Oahu with the lace bug, or sorry, the lacewing, green lacewing, and most of them just fly away instead of actually doing anything. And my interpretation is like, if you're at a buffet, there's all this food at the buffet, and then you're not going to eat the one that's an appetizing to you. You're going to go and pick up the stuff that you want to eat, right? And so I think there's better things for the lace wing to eat. And so it's not really an effective biocontrol because you have all these other food sources for them to go and predate on. They're not necessarily going to attack something that's less appetizing to them. Yeah. Yeah, and so if you have aphids on your tree nearby, they're probably gonna go eat that and be full and not want to eat the lacewing or lace bug. So that's my understanding of what's going on, at least, or my interpretation of what is going on. And then this predatory thrip, I think, is in Florida, and I'm not sure if we have that particular insect here or biocontrol here. And then I think there's mites in California that they're working with as far as biocontrols, and I don't think we have that particular species here either. So it's more of a generalist type of biocontrol that if there's something else that they prefer to eat, they're probably going to go for that versus the lacewing. But if you kill all the other bugs, they may start going against the lace bug. But good luck. I mean, you're going to be killing those anyway. You might as well kill this other one. So for me, I don't think biocontrols at this point are effective until we figure out other species that we can potentially bring in to control them. You have a question, Una?
Yeah, sorry. My computer is giving me a hard time. Yeah, I put it on the chat, but the anise level, I was hearing something about leaves, possibly darker leaves, darker fruit, have larger quantities of anise in their leaves, and that was providing some resistance. Is that a thing, or did I hear that mistakenly?
So we actually, with that cultivar paper, we did look at the anise, so it's like that, I think it's like a black licorice smell to it. We did look at that, but we weren't able to see any relationship between that, the presence of that and lace bug abundance.
Did you hear that response, Una?
Barely.
Okay, so he basically said that they did test for the anise, but there was no correlation to the level of anise and the level of infestation by the lace bug from their research.
Has anyone tried anise as oil as a spray? I mean, or as a component of spraying?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
There's another hand raised.
I have a question. How often are ALB fatal to avocado trees?
Are they what?
How often is ALB fatal to avocado trees?
I've never heard of any tree dying from ALB.
Yeah, so what I've seen is mainly the small
Yeah.
ones. And it said is basically if they're trying to push out those first few leaves and they just demolish it, the trees just don't have enough resources to push out any leaves.
Yeah, so the answer would be yes. If the trees are younger or more juvenile, or they're pushing out younger leaves and the leaves are defoliated before they can kind of establish and gain enough energy, then they can potentially die. The one that's available, there's multiple brands. So Steel is the one that I use. It's a SR450. It's the larger model. There's a SR 250, I think, which is a little bit smaller, but I don't think it has as much height. I think that's the one you guys have. And then Maruyama makes one, and then Solo makes one as well. And then you can buy generic ones on Amazon too, but I've never worked with them, and so I don't know how well they work, but they're a little bit cheaper. Steel, the one I use is steel. Yeah. The leaf blower one, it's whatever the cheapest one you can find that has the most horsepower. I've even worked with the Ryobi electric one. That one seems to have enough power too, but the battery kind of runs out pretty quickly. So if you don't have extra batteries, at least the gas ones, you can just pour more gas in it and it's ready to go. So I prefer the gas one just because it's a little bit easier. You don't have to wait for the batteries to recharge or have multiple extra batteries. What is that? Yeah. And then I wasn't sure if there's home gardeners here, so this would be equivalent to the imidacloprid product for a home gardener. You could get this, I think you can get this at Home Depot still yet. It's from Bayer, it's a bio-advanced product. And so that's what I got from the label. So it's a 1.45 fluid ounces per foot from the trunk drip line. And so what I would do if you have one tree is fill a gallon bucket of water, put the product in, and pour it around the canopy. And then water it in with your irrigation. And based on this label, I think it was 6 days PHI. So 6 days after you apply it to the tree, you can harvest, according to this particular label, as far as I remember.
Which chemical is this?
Imidacloprid. It's the same one that I soil drenched
Okay.
my one tree with. It's just the concentrations are going to be a little different from a commercial agricultural product versus the home garden product.
Still one time per year.
Still one time per year. They work really good on, I think you can use this on potted citrus too in your nurseries or in your garden, not your nurseries, it's the home garden product. So there's multiple fruit trees that you could use this particular product on for sucking insects typically.
This would be really good for new plantings, right? Seedlings, because of the spraying quantity versus that whole regularity factor versus drench them when you plant, not when, but shortly after they're planted.
But same thing for you have to make sure there's no flowers on or going to be on the tree during application.
Right, so if it's just a seedling.
Yeah, and it shouldn't have flowering, then it's fine. Yeah. And then this is kind of an out of the box thinking kind of thing. I have an uncle in Kihei that says his avocado trees are never touched with lace bug because he has a bug zapper underneath the tree. A bug zapper underneath the tree. And so I decided to put one under the tree, and that same Yamagata tree that hasn't been treated for 4 years now. It's not replicated data, but the tree seemed to be pretty clean. There was still ALB on the tree, but it wasn't as heavy of damage as it usually does. And when I checked the trap, I don't know if it's because the ALB is so small that they're flying out with the wind, but it's mostly lepidopters like moths that we're catching in there. And because it's pitch black at our station, the trap fills up so quickly with moths that you're going to have to keep cleaning it often. And so I'm not sure from a commercial standpoint how effective it's going to be, but if you have one tree in your yard, it might be the perfect non-chemical application to keep a lot more pests away from your tree. And I'm not sure if they're attracted to the light or what it is, if they're rejected from flying in at night, if they're flying at night. I'm not sure what the mechanism is, but anecdotally, it seemed to be a lot cleaner than it should be after this flush of growth.
Would you need one per tree or maybe one for every 1,000 square feet?
That part, I have no clue. I just tested on this one tree because I know this tree is the worst tree we have on our research station. I don't think I'm going to expand past this because, yeah, it's impractical to have one per tree, and especially if you have to keep checking it. The cool thing is it's solar powered, so it doesn't have to be plugged into anything. This one has a built-in solar panel on the roof, and then there's an external panel that goes out past the canopy. And so, yeah, if you're putting it under the tree and it has the panel on the top, it's going to die out in one day. But if you have an external battery so it's hooked up to a T-post outside the canopy, so it's still getting the sunlight to charge overnight. But I mean, if you want to go ahead and try it and evaluate for yourself, it's pretty cheap, I would say. I think it was $20 or $30 for one of these. Especially if you want to get rid of some of the other things flying around at night. It's a pretty good mechanism to try.
If you have a kid, you could pay a few bucks to go out and clean
Clean
it.
it. And that's my so for us, yeah, San Miguel has been the one that many of my growers have been planting more of, just because wherever they've seen it seems to be pretty clean and it has the shape and quality of fruit that their market likes. Has that same smaller pear-shaped fruit. But it might not be for everybody's market. So it's just one of the ones I noticed that's been pretty much good everywhere I've seen it, that's been growing it. I don't know if you've seen that here in Kona, or if anybody's even planting this particular variety out here.
How would you compare it to Charlotte? in terms of-
Size is about the same. These flavor, I don't know, I don't eat Charo, I only eat this one, so I couldn't tell you what Charo tastes like. But yeah, this one turns a magenta color as it ripens, so there's some color change too. So like you can see the shoulders are starting to turn a little purple. That's kind of when we start harvesting this one, and then it'll completely turn magenta as it's fully ripened.
Oh, butter kind of?
It's brie butter, yeah. Pretty soft. I think in my areas, Malama does okay, and I think it's not as tolerant as this particular variety, but it seems to be okay that my growers are okay planting it. In my area, nobody plants Yamagata if they're planting a new orchard, because in that Wailua area of Oahu, it just seems to be uniformly poor.
So has Mike or anyone done these sugar profiles or other mineral profiles of these ones that are standouts to compare, to see if there's any common or stark differentiators?
I think he's the only one doing this type of work that I know of, and it's only on those couple varieties that he's been testing it on.
Yeah, so right now, that would be, I think that's a good future project, is to actually look across the different varieties and look at their sugar profiles. I think it's just a matter of getting other researchers that have more expertise and kind of getting the chemical composition of those leaves.
Including minerals also, right?
Exactly.
Compounds, but as a lady who brought up the question of anise, or anise, whether it's that or something else may have the combination effect that might be beyond individual mineral. You know, and so there would be a really good study process to see, and it could be an interaction of the sugar variation and that. And I'm just wondering if there are ways other than this type of chemical approach that could vitiate the problem.
I think he mentioned too, like interactions with rootstock and scion, like everybody's just grafting onto whatever seed they picked up from the old fruit. And so is there an interaction between variety and scion? And is there a parental line that may induce tolerance or resistance? That's something that might be interesting too.
We reworked all the Kona rootstocks from Brokaw Nursery that I had, so it was 9 different things, and there's different stuff that substantiated, but we do a fair amount of Hulumanu here, which holds up pretty well, not quite as well as Malama, but definitely better than San Miguel and I've seen in Kona.
Oh yeah? Huh. Yeah, so that's another, is the geographic location interaction, not necessarily the elevation, but just the geographic location for each variety and how they respond differently to the pest pressure. And it could be the chemical component of that particular tree or variety in that geographic location based on the climatic effect on the tree.
How about Nishikawa for you?
I don't think we have.
Frankie was working with it one.
I can ask him how his trees are doing. I think he has some planted in Kunia as well as Waimanalo.
For a home gardener, is it important? Is there any research on, like, once the leaves drop, are you supposed to get rid of them? Or does that make a difference with the leaf bud?
Hygiene.
So the question is, for a home gardener, is it important to clean up the leaf drop versus just leaving it on the ground? And I don't have that answer. I'm not really sure how the movement of the pest on the leaf drop translate to reinfestation of the canopy. I don't know if Mike, you have that information?
So from what I've at least seen, it seems like the lace bugs themselves have long since dispersed off of those leaves, before they drop. So, I don't think there's a huge problem with just leaving them unless you're afraid of like different like funguses or anything like that. But the lace bug directly, I don't think it's.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where do you get the nozzle for the from Solo for the mist? And does it have a specific name?
Yeah, I ordered the Solo one from Solo Parts so Solo Parts. If you Google Solo Parts and you look at the parts department of the manufacturer, usually
Yeah.
you can order a replacement part from them, and that's what I did. And the specs should be on there as far as the diameter of the connection part. You want to match that with the diameter of the blower. So Solo, I think, makes the largest diameter mist part, and I think Mariama makes the smallest. And so if your leaf blower has a smaller diameter blower nozzle, then it's easier to match them up to duct tape. If not, you have to buy like a adapter. And so what I've done for the smaller one is there's a 2-inch and a 3-inch rubber adapter that I use for plumbing. That actually fits nicely on the 3-inch. And then if you have a Mariama, I think it's about 2-inch, it plugs right into that. And you just zip it together with the clamp. And all three product or companies, you can go to their parts department and order it from them. So Mariama, Solo, and Steel, I think parts departments, you can order it directly.
The nozzle?
Just the nozzle, yes.
Okay, so if I get a Still, then I would go to Steel Parts and ask them for the mist nozzle?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Was there any differences in infestation ratings among the different varieties at Omaha?
Yes, each tree has a different infestation rating. And we didn't really document the rating level on the variety. We're just mostly looking how each product was controlling the population already on that particular variety. But we have 29 varieties in our collection that's all side by side planted in this one orchard. And so you can clearly see which ones are weak and which ones are not that susceptible.
You mentioned essential oils that you also look into like planting something next to the avocados that would protect them.
Haven't done that. We've done plantings to try and bring in more beneficial insects, assuming that if you have more abundance of the beneficial insects, there'll be more demand to eat the ALB because the amount of food for everything else goes down because they're all trying to scavenge for food. But you don't see the lacewing on the leaf once you we even inoculated the field and
I was thinking
yeah.
more like basil that scares away the insects that would attack the tomato. You know, something.
Yeah, I think because the trees are so far away from the soil that you're not going to get that same comparison as a vegetable crop that's more closely planted together. And so that's why we would be more focused on spraying the essential oil up into the canopy to where the ALB would probably be more. And I'm not familiar with secondary hosts of ALB and if where on the other trees they might be or other plants. That would be another option to treat a secondary host plant with something else.
Well, the reason I asked is because I have a neighbor who has a grapefruit and orange next to the avocado and has no problem with this. So I was wondering if those trees were protecting the avocado in some way.
That's a good question. I'm not sure, but there could be some. Yeah.
What would you think of maybe using the 25-gallon tank and pump assemblies that we use to spray for TDC above. To do this. And it's
Just,
got a lot of avocado.
just a, just a spray gun or,
Big 25-gallon tank for the pump apparatus and the beginning of a nozzle.
Yeah.
and spray the tree. It's
So-
the same kind of thing, I guess I'm wondering about the.
so the benefit,
harness at the top.
the benefit to the blower is you're using air to get product into the upper canopy.
Mhm.
With those guns, you're using more liquid and more pressure to get the liquid up
Same
into,
stuff.
yeah. And I'm not sure how high your guns can reach compared to the leaf blower can reach to get liquid that high up into the canopy. I'm assuming your trees are not 25 feet. Some of them are probably in their 50s, depending on how old the orchards are. And so even that is probably not going to be reached by no matter what sprayer you have.
Thank you, Jensen. I think what we'll have is Ken and Todd come up and give us a little bit of their observations of different avocado varieties and what they're seeing out of the field. Thanks, Jensen.
There we go. Oh. I got the blackout.
Go ahead, you guys can start talking. I'll fix this.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ty McDonald. I interact with the avocado lace bug in directly and indirectly in various capacities. Extension agent here at UH, manage the Master Gardener program. So we see a lot of questions come in here or at our outreach from home gardeners throughout West Hawaii. They're growing 1 to several avocado trees. Or had our outreaches and here at the extension office. I'm also a weekend warrior, part-time avocado grower. So I have direct experience up close and personal. These little bastards, excuse my French. And I'm a propagator, so I visit a lot of farms. For field grafting. And I talked to a lot of avocado growers that are familiar with over the decades here. So I'm just going to share with you what I see myself and what I see through those various capacities as far as the most tolerant, the least tolerant varieties, what people are actually doing or not doing out there to try to control this, and maybe a little info on location. Things to think about. So to corroborate what everybody's saying here in West Hawaii, the two varieties that seem to be the most tolerant are Malama. And that's because even though 90% of the avocados are shallow nowadays in commercial orchards, the second one is Malama. So you see a lot of them out there to base those judgments, those calls on. I've also seen, but only in a couple of places, in a few trees, the San Miguel. A few years ago, a tree that was just only this big and it was just perfect. No damage to foliage and had 6 to 10 big honking fruit hanging. I haven't seen it lately, but I've seen that in a couple of locations. The least tolerant variety I've seen is green gold. They'll actually die back all the way to the graft unit. Seen that a couple of times. Not many people are growing that. I was promoting it ferociously for a while because it's a nice late winter, early spring variety when Charles are done. But I'm not promoting that one anymore.
I am. It's been great for us, year
Okay.
after year.
Well, I'm gonna say, these are, I'm basing this on untreated trees.
Yeah.
Okay, because really most of the people in West Hawaii and most avocados are growing corn are not treating. For various reasons. Trees tend to be really big here. And that goes back to the lack of pruning, but it becomes practically difficult to spray large trees. And so most people are doing nothing to it. But before I want to back up and say something, the other least tolerant avocados are ungrafted seedlings. Either if you're growing them in the nursery, I have a little nursery up here, I grow them and I can see them. And in fact, just for the heck of it, I'm checking these trees 3 times a week. And every time I go, there's lace bugs on the leaves. And there's a tree about 100 feet, a big grafted tree, 100+ feet away. And so I suspect they're just coming in every day. And what's interesting is typically you'll see one lace this is just like initial infestation, 1 leaf, lace bug per leaf, sometimes 2. I guess they're hooking up maybe, because they certainly know how to reproduce. But I'm up there 3 times a week and I just pinch them to get them off so that I know they're gone. The next day or 2 days later, there's more. Sometimes a year it's a little less pressure. So coming back to treatments, I know some people that tried soap and or oils and they didn't have good results. And I personally don't even recommend that for a couple of reasons. The trees are big and with contact insecticides, you have to contact them to kill them. And even if the tree was small and you can do it, they're flying in tomorrow. So I just pointed out my little experiment up here. So, everybody knows there's lots of naturalized avocado trees, big ones, right? All along the roads in Kona, growing in amongst other stuff. Nowadays, you can tell they're avocado trees, which ones are the avocado trees because of those horrendous symptoms. Yeah. So avocado is very susceptible and the pest is everywhere. So again, this is just my observation. So another one was a few years ago, a guy I was doing some work for, his avocados were planted in between coffee. And I was visiting there a couple times doing some grafting and I noticed, and he has a wide variety of cultivars. And at that point, they were pretty prevalent all over Kona, and his trees at that time looked pretty darn good. I was surprised. So when I spoke to him next, I explained that, and he says, well, my folks that take care of my coffee spray botanical gardens. So, and that's actually been documented in Florida as a spray that works. So that if you're growing coffee and avocado, that makes it more doable and more practical because most I don't know, Andy would know better than me, but most coffee growers probably are spraying something, right? So yeah, that's a 2-for-1 right there. So my other input would be bring your avocado trees down, and that makes it easier and more practical to spray.
How many years should we have been doing that?
Yeah, I haven't been up there lately, so I don't know. Then the other thing I want to mention is the treatment that works the best. And don't mean to offend those people that this doesn't jive with your belief system, but it is imidacloprid soil drenches. And I've done a little bit in pots. See, the thing is, again, we have a lot of really big trees here, orchards that have grown into each other. So when a tree is small, instructions say, you go around your happy little drip line with your bucket of water. It's still a lot of work. I've done it, believe me. But you know where the roots are. In a pot, you know the roots are in the pot. It's going into that plant, right? A single place that I've seen trees that are as robust as before a lace bug is a farm that for 3 years at least have been applying the drench. Now, their trees are less than 10 years old, and so they haven't grown into each other. There's grass, there's a definable drip line and clean canopy to the trunk. And they do it once a year. And I collect signs from their orchard and I graft them, and so I'm kind of used to like looking at terminals of branches for scions. And they're big, fat, honking terminal branches. Their avocados every year are as big as they've always been. I'm not trying to sell it, I'm just telling you that they're doing it and it works. So people have been asking me personally the last couple of years, well, what do you think about the that systemic? Because there's some potential downsides, right? So whereas I would maybe formerly explain what reduced risk pesticides are, and this is an example of a reduced risk pesticide, modern pesticide, insecticides. I don't even bother with that anymore. Somebody asks me, what do you think about this imidacloprid soil drench? I say, well, all pesticides in this country have a vetting process through the federal government that are testing toxicity to people, mammals, and aquatic life. So it all comes down to whether you trust the vetting process. And so far, the few people that have asked me that, I told that, I've all said, I don't trust the vetting process. So end of discussion. I don't waste my time, and I'm not trying to change anybody's mind.
They're all fired anyway.
So anyway, the last thing I want to say is maybe both Jensen and Mike mentioned how damage gets worse as you go lower. So conversely to that, where are some locations where you might be able to grow them without having to spray as much? Well, high elevations, maybe higher than most people live in Kona, but I've heard from a couple people anecdotally from Ocean View, you know, that's often 3,000 foot or above. They seem to not get it. There's no big commercial growers down there. They might have a few trees. I've been recently doing some work in Holualoa at like 27 to 3,000 foot of 3 to 4 year old trees that I'm top working, but they're interplanted again with coffee and other fruit trees. So they're spread out. It's not too practical for a person who has to come find the fruit later for the different varieties. But what I've noticed, even with this ungrafted seedlings over a year ago, they had grown pretty well. And so I see the leaves, the lace bug is there, but just to a lesser degree. But there's another place that I've done some work for it that it's got the perfect conditions for growing avocados. And for 3 easy payments of $99.99, you can get that information. It's up in on Kohala Mountain Road, where the wind blows like heck, right? When I first started going up there and they had the seedlings already planted and they had to replace all of them, but it's like, it makes me nervous. I don't like it. But they wanted to proceed anyway. Now it's a few years later. Some of the original grafted trees are nice and bushy and growing. The rootstocks, hardly any sign of lace bug because the wind is just blowing all the way. So there's a demand for avocados out there. Just find a high elevation or go to a really windy place. But you got to have windbreaks. They have Norfolk pines, and then went with a double row of bamboo. I still will be surprised if the avocados make it because the wind could just blow those little tiny fruitlets right off. So that's my observation. And I will say one opinion now that I'm done is that I think besides all these recommendations to help manage as best we can our locations is probably what's really going to help save the Charlotte variety, for example. And other favorites is biocontrol. And the lace wing that's here already, yeah, it's not real interested in it. But there are those ones that were mentioned, like Florida. When there's been other pest problems here in Hawaii, like when the gall wasp came and raged through all the native willy trees. I don't remember now if it was HDOA or USDA, but they sent some entomologists to Africa where that wasp is native to, and they did their searching and they found some enemies, and they brought them back and they went into the labs and they reared them and they vetted them, and eventually they released them, and willies are coming back and people are planting them again. So I would suggest that avocado growers contact, and the Avocado Association too, you know, contact the Hawaii Department of Ag and legislators and stuff like that and say, come on. Let's do that. Again, my personal theory is that makes sense, because the Malama and the San Miguel, they're hybrids and mixtures, but they have the West Indian avocado in them. And this lace bug is native to low elevations in the West Indian area, Mexico and Caribbean and Florida and all that. So more than likely, the insect and the avocado and its natural enemies have co-evolved with avocado in that area. So that's my sermon for today. Thank you.
I pretty much agree with everything except green gold, which to me is no different than Charwell. I mean, the same rate of defoliation over the same number of months. And I'm sorry I didn't bring my list, but when we tracked it all, Ishikawa was the most resistant, and it took, we tend to think of things in yearly, and it was 14 months to 16 months that Ishikawa took to defoliate, where Charwell and Kahalu, they were, every 8-9 months that the cycle repeated itself and still does. And I'm not going to talk about the different treatments. I'll wait for the biocontrol to. You guys got to work on some kind of pheromone thing so we could just hang up little traps like we do for fruit flies with the methyl eugenol type dog. Be great. But after Nishikawa was green was Daily 11. Daily 11 is the one that had the Guinness record, and all of the giant avocados you see in the newspaper from time. Do we still have a newspaper in West Hawaii? All those foot-long avocados like that. They all came from Daily 11, which Mr. Igami brought back to the station here in 1947, and the first trees along the border up there. That, for some reason, is very resistant. And then we get into the Malamas and CCLOVs and some of the other strange varieties that we worked with at Hawaii Tropical Fruit Growers. And by the way, every Saturday, as Robert can tell you, people come over to our nursery, and whether they buy trees or whether they just sit and talk story, everybody's, and whether you're a member or not, you're welcome to come by. But can always join. I don't know. I think I know Ty is a big and always has been a big advocate for Charwell, and I think that's fine for export. But I think we need to market differently. Our local avocados in terms of avocado of the month or avocado of the week. And it still ticks me off no end to walk into KTA or Foodland and see Mexican Haas up front, where our stuff is way back in the corner, if at all. So, we've talked about that kind of stuff too, and different approaches to marketing, but first we gotta get our fruit healthy and sunburned, so. I don't have much to say. We have problems with, that's a first, right, Andrea?
What time of year do those ones that you mentioned? that are-
Well, green gold was right on schedule. Malamas were perfect, ready to harvest, and they stole them all, along with a lot of other fruit this year, so. Ag theft is another issue when you do get good avocados, because people are watching them. Right now, I have a naked bayshore tree that's filled with fruit, and the fruit warmed up before it was susceptible to sunburn. Now, whether it stays that way, because it's not ripe, but it's dull, or color is brown, and all these things are Charlotte seedlings, green gold, right? And bayshore. And MIT 13, which is that other one, there's 2 or 3 trees up top. Here, they're all about the same every time I go look at them, so. The months change because I can't, if it's 8 months, it's on an 8-month. Schedule, so it's kind of hard to track all of them. But we have, I don't know, about 20 varieties in 100-gallon pots just for testing. And you were using a bunch of ours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I just observe them every day. You can see how they're doing. And we take scion from those and graft. I was saying about top working trees out in the field, the old wild trees. It's useless because the first shoot comes out and that's it. Started grafting in the shade house, gone. So now we're grafting in the certified, the quarantine greenhouse. So we grow the seeds out in there and graft. And that's made a big difference when there's no lace bug there, in the room where they're grown. So we got a lot of daily 11 a couple of weeks ago. And holiday is another one we're grafting, trying out, see how susceptible that is to lace bug. Well, everything but Charlotte. Okay, I guess that's it.
All right. Well, I think we don't have any other questions. We'll have to close out today. Thank you, Ty and Michael and Jensen. Appreciate you being a part of this workshop and providing us.
Thanks for putting it together.
Yeah. It's if you haven't grabbed a form for the Western Stair survey, please do. Filled it out already, you can leave it on the table. If not, maybe we'll, if Michael's email, is that okay to send it straight to Michael? And for those especially online, we'll send that to you guys so you can fill that out as well. And it'll share your PowerPoints, and we've got this recorded as well, so we'll be able to play that online. Yeah, okay, all right. Thanks very much, everybody.
Got a new quarter acre too, that